that Mike, you came late, but there's a revised version in front of you. Thank you. Just was updated to exclude township as one of the named municipalities. So order as I'm sitting for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Lisa, you want to call roll, please?
James Dyson,
Present.
Van Dusen. Yes. Bill Gritsmaker.
Here.
Mike Gunner.
Here.
Gary Hayes.
Here.
Eric Rogers.
Here.
Timothy Waters.
Present.
Thank you. I'll open it the floor for public comment. Items on the agenda, items not on the agenda. And remind you that per resolution number 2021-08A, there's a 5-minute time limit with a provision to add time if needed.
Want me here or over
You can sit there if you want. If you just want to state your name for the record, just your name.
there? Edward Kneisel, 426 North Monroe Street, Blissfield. We have a small problem, log jam in our backyard. We have 3 of them on the street there between the stoplight where the river comes around there and behind my place and down Marv 9, if you know where him. Just before you get to, what's the road there? Inland Road, there's another one there. I don't know how bad they are, I haven't looked at them. But I'm wondering, can the village do anything or can the village get anyone in here with the equipment to move those? Now, last year, you know what happened, Jim? We had volunteers. But our problem is, my wife and I were talking, if somebody gets hurt, who takes care of them? That's a bad thing, because you're using chainsaws, winches, what have you. But it's a mess and it's ruining our riverbank, Hogan's riverbank. And years ago, the village, to save money, put a pipe from Burnett Court direct to the river. They wanted to go across my property and I told them no, put it in the county sewer. And they didn't do that because it cost them money. That was years ago. That's not the only problem though. But there's a lot of tiles running now and the park, as you can see, is flooded. And the log jams aren't helpful, water can't leave. So I wonder what to do. Can the state help or will they?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Danielle, do you remember looking into this issue last year?
I do, yes. This is an issue that communities with rivers running through them struggle with across the board because there are not resources readily or easily available for communities. The River Raisin Watershed Council is our probably biggest, and when I say biggest, they're not a big resource. They have very limited volunteers, but they do river cleanups. They are able to sometimes get the Army Corps of Engineers to come in, and they do the volunteer groups that will come in to help do work days. So they really are the people that we would need to talk to about this. We do have a semi-annual board meeting this Thursday, and I will bring it up to the whole group there and see if there's any other resources or ideas at that meeting, but outside of that, the state does not have funding, the village does not have funding. When the village does log removal, we're also kicked into a completely different category. We're required to pull eagle permits. We can't just go remove a log, whereas a homeowner could do that, and I'm not saying you should, but you could do that without having to go through eagle, so it's a completely different animal once we get involved. But I'll bring it up this Thursday.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Where is the River Raisin Watershed's office at?
They have an office in Adrian and Tecumseh. The Tecumseh office, I think, is now their main office, and it's in one of the outbuildings across from the AJ Smith Rec Center.
Okay,
It's one of the log buildings out there.
well, what we're afraid of is someone gets hurt, who's gonna take care of it? You know, chainsaws are dangerous, and winches are, cables break. So I'd rather have a hired person do it. Now,
I see.
last year we had volunteers, some of the councilmen were down there working, but that's not a good idea. That's not why they're on the council.
I see that the River Raisin Watershed Council is doing a cleanup at the River Raisin Battlefield and is where they're starting, but along the river in that area over in Monroe.
Yep,
So I can talk to them as well and see how they were able to do all of that. It sounds like the River Raisin Watershed is providing the equipment and they're just looking for people to come volunteer to help.
I will go
So
to
maybe
any
we
of the
could do
council, talk to
something.
them, see what.
I would say, I know that I've talked to Maya,
That'd be fine.
I've talked with Maya about that, same issue, because, that has probably been 2 years ago since the last cleanup, that they had some volunteers. And I knew that your log jam had gotten corrected. Maya could not promise that there would be any days this summer for any log jams. At the time I talked with her, she could not commit to particular times.
Yeah.
But they do know that there are issues here, but that doesn't resolve the issue right now. I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, we have to wait the water goes down anyway.
Mhm.
I'd like to get somebody to. Probably my house will be floating and Tom Hogan's will.
Does a River Raisin Watershed, are they insured when volunteers come in?
I'm sure you sign a waiver of some
I-
sorts.
Yeah, I would have to clarify with them, but I'm not sure.
I think we did have to sign a waiver. I do not recall exactly, but it seemed like we do when we got it.
I can ask that
Regular
question
insurance.
too.
Well, and if you do talk to the Tecumseh or Adrian location, please feel free to share your findings with us.
Yeah, if I do all, we can talk to them, now, tell her what I found out, and she's gonna, so. I don't know, something will happen.
Hopefully.
There was another jam right at the main river bridge, 223 bridge too, over the weekend. I don't know if it cleared or not.
MDOT was coming today to clean that. I haven't looked to see if they made it, but they were aware of that. But they do that one because it's on the 223
Right.
bridge there. In fact, we are not allowed, we're not supposed to touch that.
Yeah, I figured that. I just noted that there was one there as well.
MDOT gets a little huffy about it, with it being on their bridge.
Maybe we need to build a bridge behind that Nigel's house.
What's that?
We'll build a bridge behind your house.
Yeah,
That way they'll
they
take.
got a huge tree there, really catching the trash.
All right, any other public comment? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to new business. So we're only here for one reason, that's the district library agreement. Sierra, you're gonna represent the library tonight. If you want to just introduce yourself. You can stay seated if you want, whatever you prefer.
Be easier to spread out my.
Okay. And I think the floor is yours. Go ahead and I'll open it up to you.
Sure. My name is Sierra McRae. I am the Schultz Holmes Memorial Library's newest trustee on its board. I want to say first that we do greatly appreciate the council calling a special meeting and understanding our urgency. We do have that deadline of May 14th to get everything finalized and approved by the state library. Calling a special meeting allows us to work out any issues and give us some time to get that approved because the state library does take a couple of weeks to get that reviewed. The bottom line here is that we all want the same thing at this point. We want to get the library off of the village's appropriation rules. I think that keeping that in mind is important as we navigate through the next steps. The only realistic way for that to be accomplished is for us to get a millage. And the first step to getting a millage is to form a district library. I do want to say that that process usually takes 2 to 5 years. We have only been at this for 18 months and are already approaching you to form a district library with the intention of seeking a millage in the next election. So I do want to just take a pause to recognize we also understand the urgency. We understand that there are finite tax dollars, that the village has other priorities, and we need to move quickly. But I also want to highlight that that means that we will have, if we are successful, saved the village nearly $300,000 over the course of 3 years. And so keeping that in mind, we understand that there is likely going to be some growing pains for all of us involved because of the transition. And so, like I said, if we are successful, we will have saved the village nearly $750,000 at this point, if we are able to get this moving quickly. After significant work with our attorney, we have a proposed district library agreement, which we have provided to you. I will say you did unfortunately get a very late update. We were informed that the township would not be able to meet our deadline. And so because that jurisdiction is already covered by the school district, we were able to remove them as an entity to keep this timeline going. Again, specifically related to the sense of urgency and trying to get on the August ballot. We do also have a yes committee already in action. We have the support of our community already working for us. Some representatives are here today. Like I said, we are aiming for an August election because we believe that we're more likely to be successful. But we also understand that it may take time to pass a millage. And giving us the August election, if it fails, we would have the November election, still levying that tax in the same time period, still keeping the village with the same funding requirement without any change. But it gives us more bites at the apple because we did see with the school district how that went. I do want to kind of walk through what the funding would look like in the interim until the millage is passed. So the current appropriated budget for the fiscal year would not change. The next 2 quarterly payments are what has already been appropriated. So there is absolutely no change to the village's budget at this point for those two quarters. Beginning October 1, so the next fiscal year, we have requested an increase in appropriations to $87,500 per quarter. And I want to explain why. Transitioning to a district library, working with attorneys, mounting an election, these things cost money. And with the decrease in appropriations that we already have dealt with over the last year, we are exhausting our savings account. So just flatly, we're running out of money. And so we need to be able to afford this millage to get to, through this transition, to get to a place where we can get off of the village's appropriations and free up that $270,000+ a year that the village is otherwise appropriating. Our intention is that if we are successful in August, because that is, again, like I said, what we are aiming for. We are successful in August, the last payment the village would ever make to the library would be January 1st, 2025. That would mean that for the 2024-2025 fiscal year, the library would only receive 2 payments from the village, 2 quarterly payments, at an appropriation that is more than $1,000 lower than the current year's appropriation. That is our goal. That is our motivation. That is our intention. If the millage does not pass, that appropriation would continue because the same needs exist. We're going to pursue election after election, trying to get this shared goal accomplished, and that is to get off of the village's appropriation goals. Part of the problem is if the library is underfunded and we have to reduce services or hours, it would appear to the public that we're not supported by our community. And if we're not supported by our community, they're not going to vote to fund us through a millage. And so we're just going to be stuck in the same cycle and are not going to be successful at achieving this shared goal. So the key here is we understand that we are asking for more money than we were appropriated this year. But longer term, it will free up nearly $300,000 per year for the village to use to fund other priorities. If we don't get the support that we need now, we are not going to be successful at achieving that goal. Quite frankly, we need your support in this first step to work toward getting that millage passed. And the first step, as I mentioned earlier, is to establish a district library. And so that portion is what we were asking you to approve today. I am absolutely happy to take any questions, but those are the key points that I wanted to.
Thank you.
Of course.
Council, I'll open the floor to you to discuss amongst yourselves or questions for Sierra.
As we discussed with council and with Danielle's comments, would it still be appropriate for Sierra to respond to us sitting down? Is that okay to do then, Jim? Or do we have to address anything right now?
No, I think that's fine. If you'd like to remain standing, you said you weren't free to stop that. If you feel comfortable there, if not, feel free to sit down.
Thank you.
Yeah, let's make this as comfortable as possible. Can you talk a little bit more about the 300,000 saved?
So the 300,000 saved is a rough estimate to the current appropriation. Obviously, that's not an exact dollar amount. That was specifically talking about the amount of money that the village is not going to have to appropriate to the library once this millage is passed.
Thank you. Where did you guys arrive at the $87,500 figure per quarter?
If it would be appropriate, Bob does have that specific information. I would like him to speak on that specific fact.
What exactly was the question?
The question was, how did we arrive at the $350,000?
The $350,000 is based on what our total budget is this year, using both the appropriation, which was somewhat obviously less than what we had asked for, plus the amounts from our savings account that we had to use to supplement that appropriation, and the amount that we had already budgeted directly from that savings account. If you add them all together, $367,900. I asked for 350 in total. Now, of course, the millage passes, you're just paying half of that. But for that 1 year and then never again. The 350,000 because our bank accounts will be reduced to the point of, maybe we'll have $15,000 left. We're sort of about 140, I guess, this year, and it'll be down to about 15. And so that 15 would help supplement 350 back up to current levels. All I was trying to do was get to this year's levels next year. That means, of course, it doesn't account for any inflation, it doesn't account for those costs that rise over inflation, like insurance costs and things like that. We would obviously have to make adjustments and cuts for a little bit, even if, perhaps even if we get the millage before that millage is levied and we're actually getting income from it. But we're prepared to do that. We want to get the millage. We're all in on the millage. I think we have a very good chance of getting it because I think there is tremendous support for this library in this community. And I think that we can get it particularly in August. I think that's just, history has shown that libraries do better in off elections like August, February. I'm hoping for August, and that's what we've been shooting for all along. We ran into some snags with our attorney's schedule. And so, because she's defending a lot of book banning cases. And so we had to wait for her to get our district library agreement together. So we, like I said, I think we're a vital part of the community. I think that citizens, voters see that, and I think that they will vote to support the library.
And I also just want to add, related to that interim funding, in our view, and now I recognize that council has to look at the terms of the contract, right? But in our view, we are only anticipating 2 payments to be made before the millage could be levied and assessed. And so we are looking at the first payment of the fiscal year will be October, and then January 1. And at that point, we would, assuming success in either the August or November election, would have had the millage levied, assessed, and will be paid out. And so that's where that January 1 of 2025 date comes from. That's true according to our council. Either success at the August election or at the November election. So while, yes, the total annual is 350,000, what we are anticipating, because we are pursuing this millage so aggressively, would only be 2 payments. Which again, in total, would be roughly $100,000 less than what we're currently.
Danielle, could you clarify for me what, and Sarah, thank you for your information. I gotta get some thoughts here. What is our normal payment to the library, and what is that amount if
So we do pay them quarterly currently.
So what are
we pay them at the beginning of every quarter. So they have it outlined October, January. That is how we pay them now.
Okay,
And
it's
so
October,
on.
so it's October?
It'd be October, January, April, July.
Okay.
Yeah, I had to think about it.
What you're saying is a general fund transfer into the library coffers.
Correct.
Police fund.
Correct. Right now, it's a transfer from general fund to the library operating account. And then that transfer, we just split evenly into the 4 quarterly payments based on appropriations. So Sierra did say that the agreement, and I completely agree with this, under 2A1, it says the village will pay the $62,075.25. That is what we currently have appropriated.
That's fine.
So that item, that dollar amount's correct, that is how we pay that now.
Okay. Okay, the 62.
So literally, it's just an addition of trying to make something we talked about last year is catching up on legal fees, that sort of thing, general basic operation funding. And a little additional to try to pull this off and get the thing passed.
That is
through the level.
absolutely.
And pay for potentially for an election or two.
Correct.
I guess my comments, again, we've been asking for this for about 22 months now, so thank you. I know it has been a ton of work. And, you know, the communication dialogue hasn't always been there, but again, thank you. It sounds like you guys are moving forward and we do appreciate that. Totally respect that. Pages 12 through the end, you know, that's just kind of basic stuff. That's you guys going through your own transitional period. So what we're talking about is 1 through 11. I guess I have a few questions just regarding it. Basically, so we're saying right now you guys operate with the village's funding as well as donations, trusts, et cetera, et cetera. What is your actual operational budget yearly? Or approximately?
That what I just said.
367.
It's 800 with 867, 900. It's what it's, that's what's on the paper. That is
367.
your approved appropriation. The difference in the appropriation requested that we make up through the library savings account. And we also budget pretty much annually 35,000 directly from the savings account. So that is mostly sponsorships. That's
The trust and all that are kind of
It's very
gone
little
to-
from sort of static savings account deposited. It's mostly passed through from sponsorships, state aid, penal fines, such and such, you know, and we get some of it reimbursed because we have to pay half of our state aid
So
to
if I
our
made
library
about
cooperative.
367, is that your operating budget?
I'm sorry,
367, is that an accurate operating budget?
367.9, so really
Thank you.
368 would be closer.
Okay. And then this would be spread across the board 100% equally across each municipality or whatever taxpayer in the school district, right? It's not, you're expecting more from the village.
Well, true.
It's
Yes,
spread
I mean,
across
the-
the entire
the-
school district equally, that
The
you're not
budget would be
expecting more
spread across
from the
the,
village. Except for potentially the building and the property and things like that that we need to work
Correct.
out potentially down the line.
The building and the property would be pursuant to the lease that we
The
are
lease,
currently
right.
negotiating. I do want to mention that as well. You will notice that that is not obviously an attachment.
Because that will cost us additional maintenance, you know, parking lot, the roof, obviously, things like
No.
that
I don't understand. Say it again to me.
I guess, well, if the bond would pass, everybody in this school district would pay whatever mill, what are you,
Right.
mill are you?
1.25.
1.25, so everybody would pay that,
I'm with you there.
but then the village itself, we own the property, we own the building, so regarding our lease agreement. We still own the building, so what do we have to bring into the picture, what do we have to
Okay.
budget wise? For maintenance for the, you know, a new parking lot, the,
Gotcha.
you know, heat, HVAC, whatever the roof.
Because we still own the building
Because
itself.
we still own the building, so
Understand.
that's part of something that we would need to consider.
And currently, the lease is a zero-sum lease that's being proposed, so
Exactly,
there would still be building operational costs.
right, so that's something that would still kind of fall back on the villages,
Gotcha.
Yeah.
villages covered, so that kind of gives, so 1.25, do you have an average approximation, have you guys determined what that millage is rate for the average?
More.
100,000.
More, because it would allow us to make a much better library. It would allow us to pay wages competitive with what the village pays other employees. But yes, it would certainly bring enough, but we also expect other expenses because we don't know exactly how, I mean, as we're coming up with a speculative budget. We didn't know necessarily what we hope to do. What we hope is to keep the employee lease just as it is. We hope, but then we don't know exactly how much benefits will go up and stuff like that, because we have no real control over that. But we hope to keep employees as village employees, we hope to keep the building as a village building. That we hope to keep everything the same way, but yes, it will raise more money, and it gives us some contingency money, which we don't have now at all. Again, we have no savings, so it will be enough to sort of deal without the savings.
But what we're looking for, Bob, is what, on $100,000 home, what is gonna be the cost for the library millage on $100,000 home? That's what he's asking.
The millage, what?
$125. On a $100,000, 1.25 mil.
Actually, I'm gonna be clear that it's $200,000 home, it would be $125 because a $200,000 home is gonna have
$100,000 value, cash value. Okay.
So it'll be $125.
And I guess then expanding on that, what is the capture from the entire quote school district then for the district library itself versus what we're paying now as a village? Have you guys calculated that based on all of the taxable value of the entire district itself?
Taxable value. Taxable value it is not like the school district. There aren't the exemptions for the school district. It is straight property tax.
But how much would you collect?
How much are you gonna generate from that 1.25?
It's a little over $400,000.
Okay.
400.
So you're looking at a
maybe more like
$50,000,
Well,
right around $50,000 higher operation.
Well, more like 80,000.
50, okay.
Just as you're talking, Mike,
Yes.
if you look at last year's budget, just under $31,000 for building operations, including electric, gas, water, sewer, repairs, insurance, and a few other miscellaneous. Oh, no, that includes movie licenses. So $26,000. That would still remain on our budget.
And
Which
then-
is totally affordable.
Not trying to tie up too much time with my questions, but I'll just get them out of the way. Reading through your proposed contract here, the governing board. So that could be anybody that just fills out whether they're Riga Township, Palmyra Township, Blissfield Township, whatever, they go and they apply.
Can you reference the page just so I can?
Sorry. Very page one, very bottom, the governing board. So anybody that's in that.
Section 2A1.
Yeah,
So there is an election process, so we would have the provisional board appointed.
right.
The resolutions submitted to the school board and also to village council, do include those. Because the township is no longer an entity in this, the village council would have an additional, unfilled spot if we were to keep the existing board. So council would have that opportunity. And then the agreement does provide for mechanisms for election thereafter. So that each member is eventually up for election and has to retain that seat.
And it would be anybody in the school district, they would have to apply at their own township and they vote at their own township. And then everything is tallied and brought.
They would actually, we'd have 4 members that had to be in the village of Blissfield, because they would represent the village of Blissfield. And then the other 3 could conceivably also be from the village of Blissfield, but they have to be within the school district, because they would represent the school district.
And it would go to the school district and not the township, correct? To the school district board.
Why would it have to be 4 from the village?
That's just how we have it set up.
How we had it written.
Okay.
Yes.
Authority under B on page 2, right, buildings. So I mean, is that the thought process that the district library down the line would somehow purchase, take ownership, take over the property, the existing building, or no?
So it gives the option, but ultimately this is really just consistent with other district library agreements that give opportunity for change.
But that's not on your radar right yet.
No.
Then I guess the heartburn, the interim period funding. Obviously, we've had some good dialogue. We've made our points clear over the past 2 years what the plan is. And again, I think we have a quote gentleman's agreement that we are here to support the library and help you through this process. I'm not sure I like personally a contract that says we have to fund this. I'm not sure that we would be able to, not saying that the plan and the intent isn't there, but things always happen. So I would, my fear is putting ourselves into a contract for a quote, non-definitive amount of time.
May I?
I certainly want to see it pass, but if it doesn't pass, then where are we at? Are we continually paying more than what we originally were budgeting for over the past how many years?
May I respond?
Yeah, please do.
So in the existing agreement that you have before you, that is the provision. However, anticipating that that would be a reasonable concern that you may have, we do also have a version of the agreement that has an automatic termination clause in the event that the millage is not passed by March 31st, 2025. Again, that would only require the village to make those 2 interim payments of the 87.5. The final payment would still be January 1, 2025. And if we are not successful at millage, that date is in there, one, because it would not change the amount of payments that the village would be required to give us, but also because it would allow us to potentially run a 3rd special election in February if we need to. So 3 bites at the apple. In the event that we would be unsuccessful at obtaining a millage before March 31st of 2025, the agreement would essentially dissolve and we would go back to being the Schultz Memorial Library, funded by the village in whatever way the village appropriates in the normal course. And essentially, we just start over. So if the concern is tying the village in to a long-term commitment, we do have that option to shorten that to a much more controlled period. I do have that sample agreement here. I'm happy to propose or to provide. We did, like I said, have that in anticipation that council would be concerned about that ultimate outcome.
I don't want to speak for the rest of the council, but I think I would feel better about that. Again, I would hope that you would trust us that we are trying to work with the board and trying to see this happen. And yes, we may have to maybe dig a little bit deeper just to get this thing passed.
Would it be
So-
helpful for me to read that termination provision, or do you want me to give it to somebody to make copies for you? I do have it with me.
Why didn't you give it to us to begin with?
Because the more optimum,
Yeah, we're willing to be,
Why-
we're carving.
Why did you not just give it to us to begin with?
Well, hold on.
I mean, if you,
Hold on, we're dealing with the agreement proposed tonight. If it doesn't pass, then we'll move on to that second
Okay.
agreement. I do hear what Mike is saying. I think it's a concern for all of us.
I certainly don't want the perception that we're
So
not on board.
It is good to know that you have that contingency already prepared. Do you have a contingency plan if your millage, if none of the elections go your way? Let that.
quite frankly, it's focusing on those millages, because if we end up having to stay under the village appropriation rules, we're going to have to cut services, and we're going to have to make a lot of hard decisions, and nobody wants to do that. So our plan at this point is to push hard for as many times as it takes. And if that is a bridge we have to come to, we will deal with it. But there are 3 bridges before then, and those are the things that I think that we need to focus on now.
My last question, is this the entire school district, or it looks like pieces are cut out, or is that?
Correct.
This
We,
is,
we can only, because there are areas of the school district that are already covered, or they're already in another library's jurisdiction. So we can only have those, the townships, like we're, the convenient thing is that Palmyra was always just part of Palmyra within the school district. We have another contract jurisdiction we have is Ogden Township. We can't even have all of Ogden Township because all of Ogden Township is not in the school district. That is something I'm hoping the district library, once it is established, will pursue, is an addition, acquiring those additional areas in Ogden and also in Riga, which are in other school districts, because they will be without legal library service following this merger. The other, or this districting, those areas in, I think, Raisin and Deerfield that are in the school district are covered by a different library. So they cannot be part of this agreement, but you're right, you're exactly right, and that's not the entire school district.
And then it's probably just dirty paperwork at the beginning, but who controls all this, who collects all this, who, you know, does it happen just one time where it switches and says, okay, you know, instead of paying Deerfield district taxes or whatever, we're gonna shift it over to Blissfield, does that fall back on the township, does that fall back on the county, who does that fall back on to make that happen?
Well, no, it's they'll pay, you pay taxes where you pay taxes now. You
So it'll be
take,
the town, each individual township will
Each
have to
individual
collect it
township.
and then
correct,
send it out. Which again, I mean, it's minor
well, I mean.
in terms of
you pay-
financial
right,
increase,
I mean,
but
you
it's
pay-
if it's a one-time deal, big deal.
You'll
you
pay
know,
where you pay your school district.
Can you tell me a little bit about the employee lease and how that, does that change
No,
at the point of this?
no, so the agreement, or the attachments to the agreement, which would require separate resolution to approve, although it's not specifically that one because it is an existing contract, will be assumed by the district library when it is formed. And the effective date of that is upon approval of the state library of Michigan. Once that happens and the district library actually exists as an entity, it assumes every contract and agreement that the Schultz Holmes Memorial Library already has. This will include a facility lease if it is negotiated prior to that effective date. That was intentionally left open so that we could continue this dialogue and get that taken care of without having to come back and do it again.
When you say assumes here, does that kind of explain that just a little bit? Only because currently the employees are leased from the village to the library. So when this occurs, and hopefully it occurs in August with that election there, would the employees then be a leased employee from the district? Or are they still a leased employee from the village to the district?
Still from the village.
So assume, I'm an attorney, so I just use words.
That's okay.
Assume just means transfer. So anywhere that the memorial library exists and stands in as a party, the district library will take that position. So everything will stay the same. Now, that's through the term of the lease. So if that's something that ultimately needs to be changed down the road, that's not, as Bob said, that's not something we're contemplating at this point, but if that's a discussion that needs to be had, this agreement does allow for that discussion to be had at the expiration of the existing lease.
You remind me, because I mean, I got, the lease doesn't terminate, does it? It doesn't just roll over.
It's by notice that it terminates.
There are termination options.
Yeah, but it doesn't have like a set date, it's just by notice, and I think I'd have to double check the time, but.
It's in here, but it is an option.
I guess my question is, and that's the way I understood it when I read through the agreement. But why would it not roll over to become completely on the district to take care of the personnel and the policies in place, or and those employees to take on their wages and their benefits?
They will take, we will pay for wages. The district library will give the village money to pay for wages and benefits. I thought the village would rather keep the employees as village employees. That was our understanding, is that it benefited the village in terms of keeping benefit costs down and stuff like that. I mean,
It probably benefits both parties. We lease the employees to the library for $0. The wages come out of the library budget,
Correct.
so it doesn't actually cost the village.
That's
Right.
not accurate.
Well,
It does cost the village, because it does cost our employees the time to process that payroll that we do not bill to the library. And then there is not a cost savings for benefits. Our benefit costs are based on each individual person. And it's factored based on their family size, their personal age and health. So what we pay for one employee, we don't get a discount for having more employees.
well, barring some payroll, everything else comes out of the library budget.
the wages and benefits,
Wages
yes.
and benefits, so really no cost to the village, it's a set cost to the library.
I understand that.
With the exception period.
From my perspective, why, and maybe there's a legal reason, I don't know. It seems silly to me in layman's terms for the district library to write a check to the village to then write a check back to the employees and the benefits. And that type of thing, that just, to me, if this whole process works through, why would it not make sense to basically, in its entirety and wholeness, it's all the district's responsibility to take care of those, writing those paychecks, keeping track of that stuff. Because then we become a bank, we're not a bank.
Can I just say, this is why it takes a district 5 years to form, right,
Sure.
right here, this is why.
And that
Because we
would
can't
take-
agree on any, we have to, every little thing has to be negotiated, and I totally understand where you're coming from. And where we're coming from, and that's why we are trying to get this on this election, and we can work out these details in the future, for sure, but like, I feel like.
I politely disagree on some of that, meaning, we have had, issues like that where we'll take care of it later. That has not been a good thing for our council. We have learned from those mistakes, and so that's why we are really trying to when this agreement is signed, sealed, and delivered, which we all, I believe, hope that it does, those questions have to be addressed. It cannot be addressed later. It simply cannot. We as a council have to learn from that mistake.
I think part of the question and part of the consideration is, personal. Part of it's personal, part of it's me, because I'm not that far from retirement. And if I'm suddenly changing employers, then there's an effect on my pension, there'd be an effect on Autumn's pension. So the part-timers is not gonna make that much difference. But except that it will, the labor that falls now to the village to do payroll, when there's lots of other payroll to do. I mean, we're just a small percentage of that. We would suddenly start doing payroll, and that's fine. I mean, actually, that certainly has been part of my consideration when I came up with the budget. We can do that. Now, I'd like some help with stuff like acquiring benefits for employees and insurance and retirement benefits and stuff like that. And I just feel like, as James said, it does help us too. It does benefit us too. And I guess somehow we've gotten the feeling that that's what the village wanted it that way. The village wanted to keep the employee lease. I'm not saying that I would be totally opposed to going the other way. I would have to go back and redo my budget.
It would certainly be cleaner because again, the money wouldn't be coming through our treasurer, right? It would be through whatever you appoint a treasurer or one of your trustees a treasurer.
Right now,
We wouldn't see any of that funding anyway. So if we're getting everything else out of the house, it would make sense for us
Right
to not be
now,
a middleman.
we have, for one thing, right now, we have absolutely no access to our bank accounts. If I want a check written, I go to Lisa. If I want money deposited, I go to Brandon. I have no way of going and getting money out of the library bank.
As
And
a
neither is
district,
anyone on the library board.
as a district library, you'll be a standalone entity,
Correct.
correct?
Correct.
Why wouldn't you want to do that on your own? And
Why
cut out the
wouldn't I?
middleman.
I'm not saying I don't.
We certainly wouldn't want to affect, we get that, your pensions and things like that, obviously that. We would, much like Karen said, we would need to work out those details, but again, yeah, it's certainly. I would be easier for us to get it all out of house, and then we're literally just landlord leasing you the property.
How do the other district libraries in the county handle their employees, Adrian District Libraries?
They all do it different ways, same with the buildings. Tecumseh owns its building. Morenci has nothing, they don't pay so much as the telephone in Morenci. I know that the Adrian District Library, the senior library staff was grandfathered through and leased.
So they're still city employees.
City employees.
Okay.
And the other people were, any new hires were employees of the district library.
I do want to add, just related to those concerns, so the existing employee lease continues regardless of whether there's a district library or not. That's not something that we're trying to change. But it does have those mechanisms to make those changes if after the transition where the village is no longer funding us, because keep in mind, we're planning this is gonna be another 8 months at quickest, right? And so that 8 months gives us continuity. We also have 8 months to, if you would like, activate those provisions and we can negotiate and talk about that. Again, we're not unreceptive to making those changes. The idea is to make the transition as easy as possible for all parties involved and as cost effective. And making changes to the employee leave at this time would complicate that, especially with the timeline. And so, again, that continuity and the timeline and trying to get these things moving quickly are all considerations. But that leaves, because it is an active agreement that already exists, and like I said, the district library would just be stepping into the memorial library's shoes. The village's rights and responsibilities are the same. You can still operate under those provisions and choose to terminate that if you choose. So I want to be clear, while this is something that we are proposing to keep the same, it does not foreclose on anything that the village cannot already do. So I think it's a fair point and a fair idea to draw out where this funding is going to come from, because it would shift. But it is something that we can absolutely change once the transition is completed.
Something else I would just say, Eric said it doesn't make any sense to have the district library pay the village and the village send it back to the employee. Well, right now, the village pays the library, which then sends it back to the village to pay the employees.
Correct.
So it's actually one step.
I guess I was, my, and maybe I didn't make it real clear. My thought process is that if we're separating this into a district library, wouldn't it make sense to separate everything? So there's a clean transition, and I don't wanna term it as a break, but it's a clean break from there. And I certainly understand the difficulty with trying to get a district library through it, and as Karen noted, that it does take, these are the things that take a lot of time, or can take a lot of time. But I'm not, my concern is that I don't want this to, I don't think any of us do want this to drag out any longer than we have to. In the same sense, we don't necessarily, at least I could be wrong, I'm not gonna speak for everyone up here, but to continue to bring this back to the circle 6, 8, 12, 14, 16, 18 months down the road, or 2 years down the road, whatever it might be, it just seems logical to me to make a clean break all at once. And I certainly understand that if there's things that have to be worked out, there's things that have to be worked out. It's just one of my concerns.
But that will muddy it up though, because we're talking two different things. We're talking employees and we're talking the district.
Right.
So it makes sense. And again, if we have to move forward to get it on the ballot, it's gonna save us in the long run. Yes, it would make complete sense to get us out of it, because again, we, as a village, your village employees, so their village employees would literally have no control. We can't hire, we can't fire, we can't literally do anything. It's just a term that you're an employee of the village. And it's generally for I guess, a retirement benefit, not even benefits wise.
Right,
So that would be like, as soon as it becomes a district, we go to phase 2 and we move forward with some sort of better lease option or employee option, we get out of that.
Yeah, so I do have some concern about that, because the lease agreement as it is an effective document, right? It exists, it is a binding contract. And so at this point, because the district library would not be funded by the millage yet, we have to maintain that consistency, because those employees would still need to be employees of the village to be paid through the transition until the millage is levied. At that point, I have concerns, and I would have to talk to our attorney because it's not my area of expertise. But I have concerns about whether we can, at that point, say, well, this contract previously negotiated is at a certain point suddenly no longer valid. I think that creates more upheaval than if we keep the consistency we have now, use the mechanism that we have built in, and it's something that we can continue to discuss moving forward, because again, the mechanism's built
And
in,
time's not on our side. We're
And
trying to
time's
get
not-
become a district.
right.
We're trying to be
So I
first
just-
and foremost.
correct, and I just have some concerns about invalidating a valid contract through another contract with a set time period that may or may not be applicable. So I just have some concerns about how that would muddy things.
Just to lay that to rest, anytime there's a merger or acquisition, contracts carry over. And this is no different. So to Sierra's point, this actually helps in the interim, but in the long term, to Gwen's point, we've got to make a decision whether or not we want to continue with the lease or have the district fully employ the individual. So.
Yeah, but in the business world, as you mentioned, James, it usually has an ending date.
Not always. I mean, sometimes those have to be established post merger acquisition, so. Especially when like you have a month to month and you rental and you buy commercial property. Those are handshake agreements and they get pretty nasty, but. I think we have a pretty clear idea that. Employee lease is an issue that must be addressed at some point. I think we've made our thoughts clear on that. Anything else?
Yes, please.
Go ahead, Glenn.
Sarah, I don't quite understand the part with the township being excluded. Can you explain that to me with their exclusion and how it still stays the same?
Is the question why they were excluded or what the effect is?
Both.
The why they were excluded is because we requested that they call a special meeting and they were not able to accomplish that quickly. The effect is there is none. It is taking the township by name. I guess I won't say there is none because I'm an attorney, I can never say never, right? So the effect is taking the township out of the agreements as an entity,
Yes.
but that jurisdiction is already covered by the school board. So there's ultimately no effect on
That's
our
what you were
patrons.
saying earlier.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And it gives village council, so there's a 7-member district library board. There's a 6-member memorial library board of trustees. So there is a 7th member to be appointed. That was going to the township because we already have 3 from the village, 3 from the school board, and it would give. And so that's where that 4th person comes from. So the effective change is you get 1 more appointment.
From a financial standpoint,
There is no difference.
there is no difference.
Not a single.
That's what I wanted to have clarified as well. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. And then there was something else, but I can't remember what it was. I'll get my notes.
Well, you could technically combine the territory and the participating district. It's literally whatever taxpayers or whatever residences and businesses are included within the drawn district in Exhibit A, right? I mean, literally, you don't need a municipality label on it. It's just everybody included in.
It is the
Exhibit A.
territory, correct.
Yes.
And we can add, as Bob was saying, we can add additional folks later on, but to your question, there is functionally, to my understanding, no difference in removing the township aside from that change in appointed member, correct, Bob?
Yes, that is correct.
And that takes out the question of, do we have to go to Ogden Township? Do we have to go to Ragged Township? Do we have to go to Palmyra Township? Because they don't have a choice in the matter. Is that correct? If you.
Well-
For approval of the agreement, we will still have to go to them for the millages. This is just the first step of approving the agreement and creating the district library and allowing that entity to then pursue it.
I think what Mike is asking is, do they have to agree? And the answer is no. They are, I mean, we did talk to them, and this is, maybe I should make this clear for the record. We went in, because the first time we talked all those years ago, we said that the school district was the quickest way. And then what we said, politically, it's a good thing, you go talk to the townships. So we did. We went and talked to the townships. And some townships seemed pretty much on board. But they wanted to put it, we asked for the minimum, because that's what Claire from the Library of Michigan suggested, the minimum required for state aid. And it's 3/10 of a mil. Well, we went to them and they said, well, we don't want to put that to a vote. We don't want to make that decision as a township board. And we go back to our attorney, and our attorney said, well, if they have to go to a vote for this, let's just go straight to a district library, because you don't want to come and get a vote for 3/10 of a mil here and then 2.5 years later ask for 1.25. So just do it now. And that we thought quite frankly, that would make me happy. We thought, I mean, it gets us off your appropriation rolls faster, and so that's what we did. We went to the school district. In the school district, I could be voting on it now. That they are meeting, we met with their policy committee this afternoon, just before coming in here. And they seem like they were gonna recommend it to the full board. So we have the school district on board. You have to have two entities. The village is the other entity. And we have a district library. So yes, we will continue to go and talk to the townships. But we don't, as far as getting them to agree to anything, that's not really necessary. Now, if we do want to pull in those areas of Riga that are in Whiteford, is that right? White, and the areas of Ogden that are in Sand Creek, we have to actually get the whole township on board. And so those two townships would become part of the agreement. But they can.
But it makes more sense just to follow the.
I'm sorry, they will be
It makes
added
more
to
sense to
district.
follow a district because they're the ones that use it. That's pretty much what you started with is we'll focus on the school district and stick to that.
Because we
It
need
makes
two
more sense.
entities.
Yes.
And so that's why it's built in so that the additional municipalities have the option of joining later, but don't hold us,
Later, right.
don't hold us down.
They are not required to form the district, but if we want to bring in those outlying areas, they would need to.
And my last point, I guess not to tangent off too far, but you've got two pretty much sales pitches. You got one to the townships or the surrounding municipalities that aren't involved, and then you've got one to the village. Because you've got, okay, you're gonna pay 1.25 mils more as a township board and resident, school district resident. You're also gonna pay that as the village resident on top of what you're already paying.
No,
No.
you just pay 1.25.
Just through your township.
Right,
You don't have
but-
to pay two. You don't, no one pays two.
No, we'll pay the same, but they're already paying, the village residents are already footing the bill. So that money that's already collected would be potentially reallocated to elsewhere, other operations of the village or to the library, things like that. So again, it's how do we sell to the public that we're not just gonna take that money and throw it at something else as a village, you know what I mean? The village needs to say, what are we gonna contribute to the library continued? Is it just gonna be the building? Is it gonna be some additional funding that we're already, giving to the library to operate? Or are we gonna reallocate those funds because, quote, we're already paying for the library, now we're gonna pay for the library, and we have to sell, okay, what benefits are the village gonna get? What other services, what else are we gonna utilize as a village with that?
That would free us that money for you to do.
Yeah,
And that's why I keep circling back to, we do have a shared goal.
Yeah.
And so we hope that you will support us in this, and then we would in turn, because it's the shared goal, support you in doing the same.
but you can see the sour taste in some of the village residents mouth where they're saying, okay, we're gonna pay more, but what are we gonna get out of
Oh, absolutely.
that reallocation of funds?
The question is really whether there's an alternative for us. There's not.
That's why we have a yes committee that
Mhm.
is already formed, already working, and is going to be planning language.
And that's what we gotta get is the information out there so that people have
Correct.
facts rather than.
And that is formed as a legal entity. It is in action. They have a bank account, I believe. They are, when I say that we're aggressively pursuing this, I cannot understate that. And so we do have that in play. And obviously it's gonna be marketing, right? Any village, any ask for money period. This is marketing. Any ask for money period is marketing. And so I think because we have, again, a shared goal, we'll work together on that. And hope that you would support us in doing it because of that shirt. But you're completely right.
I
It's
compare it
just-
to the
it's just a
pool,
struggle.
because we're paying for it as the village, but the more people we get to come use the pool, the less the maintenance and the upkeep and operations are gonna cost us for that pool, so,
It's just a shared struggle.
yes.
In their committee, and I'm speaking, please correct me if I'm wrong, Sierra, or anyone else from the library board. That yes committee that she and Oliver just spoke about was formed within the past 90 days, essentially. And they have come together pretty quickly to get that ball rolling down the hill. So they have done a lot of work to get that in place and get it in motion.
I do wanna say, I'm sorry that I didn't mean to be, it's just so urgent, and I'm sorry, Gwen, like, I understand your concerns, and we wanna be amenable to all of these things, but we just wanna get this through. We feel we have very strong support, and not only in our village, but in our townships too. And we are gonna work just as hard as we worked on this to get that to pass in August. We feel like that's our best bet, and we feel like we have great support, and we've only just begun that support.
One question I do have, I mean, I know with the August one, is there enough time between the August and November election to get it back onto the ballot in the November election?
I believe that our attorney said,
In
yeah.
school,
But the school was passed, was it not passed in May, the school board one we had a year ago?
No, the fire departments were passed and the school was not. And then they passed, I believe, either February or the Jan.
We also had different timelines than normal because we're proceeding by resolution and not by petition. So I understand that that also has different timelines. Our attorney indicated that we could pursue this way, so while we have not asked the specific question, we have not been led to believe that there is any issue with that.
should if it passes, and, well, I think that was the question now. I think I'm seeing the difference in what Eric is saying though, and we'd have to check on that.
Cause
But
I
what
would
she said
certainly,
was that if, whether it passed in August or it passed in November, it would still be levied at the same time.
Correct.
In February, but she didn't say if it fails in August, and you know what I mean? It means if we don't make the I think we were still in the context of if it doesn't make the August deadline. But I think but it seems to me there was never been any question that if it failed in August, we'd come right back in November.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. We have never been led to believe that that would be an issue, but full disclosure, it's not a question that we have asked because it has.
Well, it was just a surprise on the township, right? Because again, my taxes went up, whatever, because the most recent bond that passed, the township, or we didn't assume it was gonna be implemented. And it was, so right, Brandon, so when's it would be implemented the first.
You can't, you're holding your hand right in front
Sorry,
of you.
January 1st or whatever of 25. All of our taxes went up due to that last bond. That wasn't supposed to be enacted, but it was, right? That's why everybody's taxes went up, everybody's property taxes went up this last year, which nobody.
Are you talking about the community bridge?
It was the school bond, I believe, that was levied. It wasn't,
The school bond.
The school bond,
because you're assuming, I guess my question is, you're assuming that you would be able to collect that first, like you said, January of.
Yeah,
25.
we did verify that with our attorney specifically, that it would be assessed, levied, and paid to us early February.
I just don't want it to pass and then it goes till August or something, and then you're
No.
coming back to us and saying,
Oh, no,
we're not
no.
gonna get that, we thought we would.
Well, even if that's true, it's still contracted in the agreement that you would only have the two payments. If it's
Yeah,
taxed.
if it passes, you're good.
I think to be on the November ballot, you have to have your language in by July 30th, but you may want to double check on that.
and that was what I was thinking of, because I know like to file to run an election as an elected official, it usually occurs before the August election.
Yep.
Right, I know that there, like I said, I know that there were some changes, like, we were told that we had, the Advance had an article about how we needed to file, ballots by petition in April, but we actually don't have a deadline until mid-May. So it may be something to that effect, but again, fair point, I do need to get that answer. It's just not something that has ever been conveyed to us as being an issue, so it's not something we've looked further into.
I'm just on the Secretary of State's website. It says deadline for petitions to place county or local ballot question on the November ballot to be filed with the applicable county attorney by Tuesday, July 30th.
But we're
But we are not
not
proceeding by.
We're a
Your
resolution.
We're proceeding by resolution, which is the distinction.
Okay.
We are getting a little off topic.
We're just trying to be how long you're.
Danielle,
Point of.
could I hear your way in it? And my assumption is, as well as, Dave, took a look at this from an attorney perspective. Any questions, concerns from either him or you?
I did share this with Dave last week. He unfortunately was ill on Friday. He did email me today letting me know that he's working on it, but would not have enough time to have them ready for you guys today. So as soon as I get them, I can send them, but it'll be after today's meeting, obviously. I did go through the agreement. I did have a couple comments, I think, and I can go through them. Some of them you guys have already talked about. On page 5. Yes, I apologize.
Sierra, do you want water?
I would happily take it. I
Page
appreciate it.
5, item 4, I don't have a concern with this, but my question, I guess, is to what level would we maintain it? Is it the current level? And I just thought it would make sense to clarify that within that language, just so that we know, and I think that's the intention from you guys, but.
Yes, 100%. That is exactly, that language was left in there because we are in active negotiations on the facility lease, and it was intended specifically to maintain the status quo so that there are no issues with that.
So I think it should just say that, like, as current or something that identifies that it's the level we maintain it at now. And I think that's what we want to do, but it just would clarify it. And I think that's super minor. My other comments or questions, just the 87,500, you guys tell me, and then I have to find a way to set the budget to that. So my question is, are you good with that amount? And make sure that you did see that. On that same page, item 3, I would not ever recommend to you guys that we set an appropriation with no expiration to it. That I would never recommend it for any department. It is not realistic for me to budget that way because I don't know. We project what our revenues and expenditures are gonna be out a year, and even sometimes those are not always accurate. I have no idea what the economy is gonna be like in 2 years, and the way I read that, and again, I think you guys kind of talked about that, is my concern is what happens if it doesn't fail. And then what happens there, I would recommend like some clause based on what our revenues are, like it can't just be a blanket forever approval.
And you have something
I do,
there.
yes.
It's much like we talked about the last budget session of us paying for the legal fees to try to make it happen. That's really what, it's just a different way of.
Admittedly, I've
Right.
only been on the board since the end of February, so I'm coming in kind of at the end, but that sounds accurate.
That was my question too, Danielle. Where's the 87,500 coming from?
It would come from general fund of the village. But
Well,
in order to fund that level, and I'm really right now in the thick of capital, I've not started operating yet. Well, I have started it, but I don't have a very firm number. Definitely based on just looking at this year's budget, cuts would have to be made elsewhere, or projects could not be funded.
Well, that's my question too. What's gonna get cut? What's not gonna happen?
And that, I mean, I'm gonna make a recommendation. If you guys say that's what we're funding them at, I'm gonna put that in the budget, and then I'm gonna go through and make a recommendation. Ultimately, though, you guys are either gonna take my recommendation or you're gonna say, no, Danielle, this is more important. We're gonna fund this, and then you're gonna have to tell me where to cut elsewhere. On that same page, item B, and this is, I guess, really just a question for you guys. I thought that the township, the Blissfield Township had agreed to fund you guys at some level. I know they've been removed now, but I thought when Greg had came and well, I think there were several of you here, but they had indicated.
No, they just indicated that they would support the district library, and actually it wasn't. We were told they had the votes. That's all. There
For
was
that
never-
minimal,
there
that
was never
minimal bill,
any-
right?
Well, I thought there was like $25,000 that they had approved to fund.
No, I don't remember anything like that.
Okay. The employee lease, we've talked, I had the same concern, just because and I could be wrong, but my understanding of the district library is that The district library is completely separate, your quasi municipal board. So you have full access to your funds. The bank accounts would be in the district library's name. So I felt like it really kind of muddied the waters a little bit, having the employees done through the village and paid back. And kind of to Bob's point earlier, we do some back and forth now, but it's a simple bank transfer on our end because the bank accounts are under the village with us doing all of your bills and the payroll and things. So it does, I think, complicate things.
I really think that certainly having the employees separate was actually the first thing we considered. But then we were led to believe the village would rather keep the employee lease and keep the building lease. I mean, because we considered that as early on in this discussion, you mentioned that the request that establishes the building would allow you to sell the district library the building for $1. So we even considered taking on the building fully, but I guess we were under the impression that, you know, and certainly, okay, one, we were under the impression that that's what the village wanted. Certainly, again, the less we change, the faster we move. And if we can get to the millage, we can get the district formed, we can get the ballot language and everything approved, and we can get that millage in August, then the district library and the village can talk about all sorts of things. I mean, and isn't that employee lease, as some, I can't remember, you were talking about its termination clause. The village can just say, we wanna terminate the lease, and then we'd have to say, okay, you know, we're district library employees now. I mean, that would be simple enough.
So the term of the employee lease is 1 year renewing annually. However, unless terminated by either party giving 45 days written notice to the other.
And that's it. I mean, that's it. So we do have that option to continue the consistency, and when it is appropriate, you still have that.
I think we're prepared to do that. I think we're prepared to, I mean, obviously, my job will be to determine how we pay benefits and provide for retirement and stuff, but I can certainly do that.
And my last comment that I had, it's on page 19, and this is assumption of contracts on the library's portion, but you have item 6 utilities and then nothing listed, and currently the utilities are in the village of Blissfield's name with the Schultz Homes being the location. So my question was, does anything need to be listed there, or would you guys just transfer those accounts from the village to the district library? Or how would, I guess I was not clear how that would work. And I know the facility lease agreement is still being talked about, but I identified it there.
It was identified there because the lease has not been finalized. But at this point, the draft, if I'm recalling correctly, indicates that the village, or that the library would be responsible for utilities.
For utilities, yeah.
So the library, so while the contract for the utilities is not in the library's name, the district library would assume paying for those contracts. So that would be a logistical transition we would need to figure out. But because the contracts are not in the library's name, we can't assume them, and so they are not included as a contract in that provision. So they would be covered by the facility lease agreement. Does that make sense?
We can certainly.
It does. I think it's a little bit weird with the facility lease not being in place right now, because I guess if we enter into the facility lease, let's say, I don't even 2 months, and I'm just making up dates. Before your millage, in 2 months, we enter into that, and it says that you guys pay those utilities, but they're still in our name. How does that transfer? Do we continue paying them? And again, it's kind of goes back to the employee thing. Are you writing a check for then us to turn around and pay that bill? Or would you assume them under your name? And I think that should be spelled out somewhere, right? And maybe it's not this agreement, maybe it's the facility lease agreement. Just so that we know transitioning forward, how we're supposed to proceed and handle those.
Yeah, and I think that as a bottom line, the library is and will be responsible for those payments. I think how we get to that point depends on how the village would like us to do that. If you want us to pay you and reimburse you, I think that's a decision that council can make, and we can, pursue that. I mean, we could really even do that in the negotiations in the lease. I don't think that it's appropriate to put it in the assumption of contracts, because it's not a contract we can assume, because the Memorial Library does not exist as a party to that contract. So we cannot assume a contract that the
So
library.
really, utilities
Take
shouldn't
utilities
be
right out of
listed.
it.
They should just be removed.
Put it back under
We-
number
we cer-
5.
we
or
certainly
page
could.
5.
Because
It-
right
yeah,
now, we have no.
We could
contract for
absolutely stress that.
Put it back under page 5, number 4, where you wanted the existing operations as agreed with.
Or it could just be flatly stricken, because it will be incumbent in the facility.
So that's what I guess I think I would just remove it. And then I do, just because I want to be upfront with you guys, I would not recommend to council that we act as a bank for an entity that's not under the umbrella of the village. So
We don't want
for, for budgeting purposes moving forward, it's not our job to, like, we would not do that for any other public entity. It's not fair for us to assume that liability and responsibility, nor is it fair to you guys, who then have to have your books audited, and you say, well, we give the village X amount of money every month for utility, but we
No,
don't have
I'm-
an invoice to
I'm
back
actually
that
with you
up.
on that.
Completely.
Again, I think obviously we got some bad info. Cause
Yes.
I think that, I think if, separate's good.
Yeah, and
But we can.
And it's not like, to Bob's, I will help you, give you contacts, I will help, whatever I can help with, but I just think it sets the village and you, the district library, up for failure to act in that
Well,
capacity.
and I think that
With
is,
both.
I agree, and I think that, again, once we get this millage, once we get the district formed, actually, as soon as we get the district formed, we can start talking about this. And then that way, when the millage is passed, we're ready to go. So but yes, I think we're on the same page. I personally would rather we be district library employees. I mean, I don't know, probably we'll have to go with an 80-20 insurance split. We won't be able to enjoy the full, benefits of that. We may have to go with an IRA, a 401k rather than a pension. But we'll just do it. And I mean, I think if that's the price, I think you're right. I think it's cleaner. I think it's the term that Mike used. I think that's fine. And it's certainly something we considered. And then I guess we thought the village prefer, and there are benefits to us. It's easier, obviously, to just keep the status quo. But what is true is it's easier, and it's conducive to getting the millage passed in August, to get a millage in the ballot, to keep as little change as possible up through that millage passing. And once that's passed, I'd rather be separate.
I would also add that the district library agreement is intended to outline the rights and responsibilities of the village, the school board, and the soon-to-be district library. The village's rights when it comes to payment of those utilities from the library are the same regardless of whether we include the logistical information of how we're gonna do that. Because that, you get paid for those, like, you will never be responsible for those utilities. Unless for some reason it changes in the lease, which I don't think anybody is talking about. So in terms of moving forward, the village already has that right to not have to pay those expenses. I think what you're concerned about fairly are the logistics that we can work out once this is resolved. But as Bob was saying, we don't have to.
It is not the concern of payment from you guys. It's like you said, the logistics, the audit, and not just for us. I mean, you guys hire whoever to audit. This agreement says you'll audit the books, and I'm assuming annually after you will. Your auditor comes in and they look at your records and you say, I pay the village there, that it's not gonna be fly. Like, I don't think they're going to like that at all.
Oh, I agree, and but I think in any sort of thing like, I mean, we're changing, this is a transition. And in that transitional period, there are things that were done one way that are gonna be done another way until at the end of the transitional period, we're completely separate. It perhaps still, you know, all district library employees perhaps still with a building lease and all that, but I mean, it's gonna take a while to make the transition and make the change. And we just, I mean, until we get the funding to pay for this library, I think getting ahead of, because again, if we start talking about what Sarah was saying before, that Mike said he thought he was more comfortable with putting that termination clause in there, everything just reverts back to today. If we put the termination clause in and we're back to being a district library, we're back to being a village library, employees or village employees, they have to be. And so to jump the gun and say, okay, everybody's a district employee before we have money from the district, from the millage to pay those employees, I think is getting ahead of ourselves. And I think it's setting us up for a big mess down the road.
And I don't disagree with you on that, Bob. However, we have to assume that you become a district library. And then what's that time frame? Because then we're working through these procedural or processes for how long? I mean, we've had the facility lease agreements been going back and forth for 18 months, I'm gonna say. So what's our security or assurances that this is going to be addressed and when? And that's why I understand not putting the cart before the horse, but how does the village council have a comfort level of knowing that's going to happen?
We can start talking about it now. I mean, there's no reason we can't start talking about it. I just say, you know, we can't become district employees before there's a district. So I mean.
Well, leading to that, my last, I guess, comment, and it's kind of a big one. The 62, whatever it is, 62,075, that's what we're paying based on their approved budget this year for 4 periods, 4.
So we've already made 2 payments.
Yep.
We're getting ready.
We need the April first.
So here's
But
your,
we just made the 3rd payment. I don't know what today
I
is.
forgot.
I'm sorry. We just made the 3rd payment, so we'll have 1 more.
or for our fiscal year, yeah.
Yes.
My question though is 87.5 over. Well, potentially 2 more. That's a $50,000 increase when we were arguing. Previously at this time, at budget time last year, over a $10,000 or $20,000 lower legal fee to make this happen. So again, we're looking at $50,000 on top of what we originally budgeted. That I think is something to really point out and consider for us. So that's all.
I'm sorry, I don't mean.
No, go ahead. I mean,
But I think that we have to remember that what this achieves, right? So we are spending more money. I'm not gonna, I'm not going to sugarcoat that. We are asking you to spend more money.
Right.
Because that frees up, if we are successful in pursuing this millage, our entire budget that the village can then repurpose.
Forever.
Forever.
yeah,
And
it's
so-
how do we sugarcoat it or,
Well,
you know,
yeah.
which way we kind of scale, but again, that's $50,000 out of a increasingly tight budget this fiscal year or next fiscal year that we're gonna have to try to make that happen. And
Right.
That's gonna be definitely a challenge, I think.
Right, and if we talk about later, shortening that term, when we're only talking about 2 payments, then we can talk about how we compensate for that later through the rest of the fiscal year, right? Like there's discussions to be had, right? Which is why, again, we are incentivized to pursue this aggressively. And so,
It just feels like one last squeeze of the turnip, you know what I mean? But, and I don't think it's malicious or intentional, but again, that's 50,000 that we have to come up with.
certainly, it's 50,000 that you come up
To
with,
make that happen.
it's
Yes, it
50,000,
benefits us
right,
both in the long run,
right.
but
And
again,
certainly,
It's 100,000.
well,
It's not 50.
two payments, 2 more payments.
We understand.
October,
If
We've been
it
using
passes.
our
If it passes.
If it passes.
and that's why I don't wanna, that's why
If not,
I'm wholeheartedly against a committed contract agreement on that. Yes, we wanna work with you, but we, again, like Danielle said, there's things that we just can't guarantee. We
Right.
can't guarantee it to the police. We can't guarantee it to the DPW. We couldn't
Right.
guarantee it to either.
We understand, and I do want to also say, I neglected to mention this earlier, so we did meet with the school board, policy committee. I don't know what's happening at their whole board meeting, because obviously we're not there, Greg, I think, is there. But they are presenting both options, both the draft with the funding in perpetuity or whatever, and the automatic termination provision. So they will approve either one that the village council approves, just so you're aware. I know that that's not before you now, and certainly if we get a no vote today on this, I think our intention is to come back next meeting with that automatic termination provision. Just, again, I am always a proponent of transparency, because I don't think that we can achieve this large goal and this huge project if we aren't transparent. And so that's why we also have that and gave that to the school board, so that's the intention. I just wanted to mention that regardless of what happens today, we are still moving forward because the school board does have both.
I would.
So the school board had both, but
This would happen literally as I was driving home from work, so. And so,
just curious, we're the ones that you're asking for the money from, and we got.
We're doing
just
this
the
up
one.
to the minute, like with our attorney.
2 and 3 should be stricken from the funding mechanism here in the contract, and we will say, again, we've had an agreement, we've been for over the past 2 years that we've tried to make it operate, try to fund you as possible. But putting something on paper that we can't guarantee to be it's not responsible. Again, I think the intent is there. I want you to trust us, but I don't think we can guarantee those things, especially a $50,000 increase over the next 2 years.
I just want to make a point. So, originally, we were asked to raise that 3/10 of a mil from the townships. We pursued a district to completely get off the books. So we totally understand what it's like to have a tight budget. Our appropriation was cut significantly last year, and we've dipped into savings, and by the end of this year, we're gonna have $15,000 left. So we totally understand. And we don't even know what's gonna happen if, you know, we understand, we want to work with you here on this, and we understand the tight budget. We are trying to save you money. That is the bottom line. And we are trying to free up an appropriate amount of money to run a well-functioning library. I just want to.
Yes, if it passes, it potentially saves us $200 or some $1,000 over the
Year
next
after
fiscal
year after year.
Yes,
Yes.
but again, we're having to come up with that now, that additional 50,000 out of next year's planned fiscal budget. And that's my point. Right now, I would much rather not be in black and white. We have the gentleman's agreement. We're talking well, we're finally communicating with you guys have made extreme strides over the past 2 months as compared to 22 months. So again, I would much rather you say, okay, lawyer fees are gonna come to this. Can we work something out? This is gonna cost us to do this. And then, you know, at least we can kind of wheel and deal back and forth, but not commit something that legitimately locks us into something we may eventually not be able to do.
but that would be true regardless of the amount, because Danielle would have to prepare a 2024-2025 fiscal year budget where she's making these commitments regardless. We're just asking for more upfront. And again, if we use that automatic termination provision, you haven't committed to what you're funding us for the other 2 quarters. That's a discussion that would come out of whatever's in the budget. That's something that you guys would decide. So, you know, ultimately, if that ends up being a negotiation point later on,
Right.
because you already essentially pre-funded, because we are, like I said, we do need that money to run this election.
But and heaven forbid it did fail, then we're paying, you know, the extra 50, and then we're still gonna pay the operational costs of what you guys requested this year or next year. That makes sense what I'm saying. We're still gonna want the 62 or more per quarter on top of the 2 extra payments of total of $50,000 that we're quote committing to your contract. Because if it doesn't go through, you're gonna go back to the normal operations and request.
But we
350 or
don't have,
whatever you're at.
it's a negotiation, right? And you didn't give us what we asked for last time, you have to give us what. we asked
And I think we've made that abundantly clear, is that we're not gonna be able to fund.
Right, and so I think that
350
that's basically your answer, I mean. If we go to the automatic termination option, you're in complete control.
You get to choose how you want to fund us at that point. Which, you know, leaves us spending, but as a position, I'd rather risk in the opportunity to get this millage passed and
Do
get.
you have that language in front of you?
I do, as a matter of fact. Would you like to see it or would you like me to read it?
Go ahead if you will.
It's short.
So where does it diverge?
So this would be,
Section 3
section,
or section 3(2), section 3(3), 3A3,
3A.
3.
After the January 1st, 2025 payment, the village shall have no additional obligation to fund the district libraries. The termination provision is actually a separate subsection under section 5 other provisions. It's subsection C. It reads automatic termination. In the event a district-wide millage of at least 1.25 mils has not been authorized by March 31st, 2025, the district library agreement shall expire by its terms, and all assets of the district library shall be distributed as provided in section 4B, which essentially says that we return to where we are now. All of the things that have gone to the district library go back to being Memorial Library.
If this fails though, we've authorized an additional $50,000 to try it and make it happen. Then we're gonna go back to the drawing board and we're gonna have people saying, oh, the village wants to cut the library funding or the friends of the library or the yes group or whatever. Again, that makes us look bad and I can sleep at night. Again, we're trying to do the right thing. But again, it falls back on us being the bad guy. If this fails and we give you the 50,000 additional, and then we say, we can't fund you throughout the rest of the fiscal year 24-25 on what you requested.
Well.
Because if it fails, that's what you were up here last year budget time saying you couldn't operate at the current fiscal budget of what we approved. So again, if we give you an extra $50,000 to try to make this happen, it doesn't happen, then we have to continue to pay you the original operations that you're requesting.
No, wait, you keep saying it's an extra $50,000, it's not. I mean, it is, it's an extra $50,000 in the appropriation, absolutely. It is not an extra $50,000 in our budget. That $50,000 is in our budget this year, it's just coming out of our savings, which will be non-existent at the end of this year. It's not an extra budget, it's not extra money for us. It is
budget general fund.
Sorry?
It is for us.
It is correct, but I'm saying let's be clear that this will just maintain the same budget we have had all year without any regard to inflation or increase in personnel costs or whatever. We will make cuts and we will try to get this, we're going to try to get this done. I mean, again, my sense is I am at least one, all in on getting this August millage. Two, very confident that we can get it with everyone's support. And I don't just mean financial support. I mean, you people are important people in this community. I'd like to see you go out, shake hands and say, vote for the library. Because that's what will get this passed.
But you understand my fear, if it doesn't pass, then it falls back on us to try to.
If it doesn't pass, and you roll the other two payments back to, okay, you take the 87.5, add it together, subtract it from what our budget was this year, and then just give us the remainder. And I'll have to find some.
Yeah, and that makes cuts, but
I mean,
that fall back on us, we're the bad guys.
If the millage fails, there's going to have to be cuts. I mean, that's just the way it goes. If the millage fails, we will be in a dire situation.
Right.
But I'm not planning for the millage to fail. I don't think there's, I don't think.
The perception is that we're picking on the library, and we're certainly not picking on the library because we're making cuts across the board. But I want it to be crystal clear, you know what I mean? These little offshoots, friends of the library, things that pop up because we're not funding or not willing to fund the library, it comes across perception wise
Friends of,
that-
Friends of the library group, Friends of the library group exists across the nation to support libraries regardless of if they're having villages or not. They're just volunteers who help with the book sales, they do fundraisers for the library, they are very multi-faceted.
But you understand what my point is, if we try to pay this extra $50,000 for the next 2 quarters. And it doesn't happen, then we're still paying the 62. We're potentially setting ourselves up to pay that 62,750,
Well.
which we already told them we can't
That's-
afford to do.
That's the thing, we haven't set a budget for the 24-25 year. So at this point, we could say yes to.
I'm all in on it, I want to, but it could get ugly.
$175,000, but that could leave you with potentially no money
Yes,
to operate
correct.
Correct. and-
after that first 6 months.
Roll of the dice.
And you just.
So
told the
if
director
you're-
that
if
we'll
you're-
handle that.
A riverboat gambler, I'm all in for you. I love it. I say we go for it,
That's where we're at.
That's where we are.
but
I have.
come budget negotiations, your second half of the year is going to get squeezed if you do not make it.
We do need your help. I mean,
I-
you asked us to
You
find
have our
money
support.
and we are trying to find all the money,
We
all
get
the money
this.
for you.
This is not an issue of we do not want to fund you. This is an issue of can we fund you? We are struggling to fund every department. Every department is making cuts. The library has failed to make concessions in the last 3 years.
Not
So
true.
at this point, you are going to get forced to. I'm just letting you know. So 6 months, $150,000. I'll agree to it, but it's gotta have a termination clause. And then budget negotiations are gonna get real slim, real quick.
Well, hopefully we don't get to budget negotiations because we're pursuing this so
Well,
aggressively.
budget
We-
negotiations will happen before the year end. Which is
Budget-
September 31st.
It'll be-
Right, I
We'll
understand.
have that.
We're only a
we'll have that
couple
approved.
months away from that.
Right, no, I understand, but I
Yeah.
mean, in terms of,
Oh,
you have
sure.
the ultimate power in that. And we get that. But that's also why we are so aggressively moving on this.
So I'm gonna ask council if there's a motion or do we wanna table this?
I'd like to ask one more question, please.
Oh, then we can have a lot more discussion.
Oh, I can just, see, our question is this, I know August, I get it, I know where to study to go. I work at a school, yes, to go for those off time for elections. I'm not trying to be smart, does it have to be this August of 24th? Asking, can it be in, and I'm looking here and I'm not having any success. I don't know when the next election would be, not the November election, because I don't think that would be the right time, like you stated. But, and I think that maybe we could maybe get some of those other things that are loose settled, if you would. I don't know, is there a January 25, is it a February 25? Is that something that,
So
I know sooner is better, I totally respect that, I get that. But is there another date, a May 25 date?
So we could pursue any election ever, but you'd have to fund us to that point. And we have the momentum now to get off of your books.
November is gonna get you the better turnout. It's a general election.
But there's actual research that shows that libraries are more successful in off elections.
Yes. And schools do the same thing.
Yes,
To
correct.
your point, Gwen, we cannot continue to fund. So
I-
it's now or never.
Well, see, that's what I thought too. And that's why we were pushing for August, because we thought.
It's the right
Like,
time.
Yeah.
I mean, that's, again, I love what you're saying. I mean, I think that would be great if we thought you would fund us through till February, but yeah, Lord, I mean, I thought that the sense was. The sense was more what James and Mike were saying, so
I'm looking at it from the perspective, in my opinion. There are little things that are not sorted out yet, that I like to have things. When we sign it, it's done, we're gonna come back. I think Danielle kind of alluded to some of those things, the time frame, how long it can take to have those discussions. That's how I think. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, that's just how I think. Here's the paper, it's all done, it's sealed. There is none of this coming back 6 months later for that type of a discussion. That's the only reason I'm stating that. But I understand the point of the finances. I certainly don't disagree with that either.
So just as a short additional note, so something else that I mentioned earlier. if we take more time to do this, I work for the county, I understand finite tax dollars, I work on a budget, I'm the circuit court administrator, I work on budgets, these are what I do. I understand finite resources. If we lose funding, which is under no certain, it's clear that that is going to be a reality. If we start cutting down services and making the library appear as if it's not a well-funded, well-valued, well-utilized resource, we are not going to be able to get the support of people to fund that millage, or to approve that millage and fund us. So the longer we wait, in addition to the strain that it puts on the village, it also just makes our chances of success smaller. And so I think that's something else to consider.
And that's what you had stated earlier. So.
Yes, and so I just wanted to circle back to that point, because I know there's been a lot of information shared, but that is also a concern. So I think that it is in the best interest of everyone to shake out as much as we can and understand that as I'm sure James can attest this, with any merger and acquisition, there's going to be some additional discussions afterwards. That's just the nature of, unfortunately. I also like to have things settled. And so coming here and not having a draft, knowing which draft to give you, for example, because this was happening at 5:45, is not a comfortable position to be in.
I understand.
And so that's where we're at.
Thank you for addressing.
Yeah.
That was my comments, my James.
Okay, thank you. Bill?
I still have skepticism the way this thing is written. I don't like, my opinion, I don't like writing a blank check, and I'm afraid that's where this might be headed. Like everybody said, you know, we're already operating in a tight budget, and to increase that by another 50 grand is, I think, I'm hard pressed to vote for that. I like the idea of a district library. That's why, that's what this budget contention in the past, and in the current budget year, that was the impetus to work towards a district library. So I think it's a great idea, but I'm not sure that our budget can support another $50,000. That's where I'm at.
Well, I think that shakes out during budget workshops. So where the additional funding is allocated from, whether or not it's pulled from general fund or a capital project, or it's a reduction of the library services in the second half of the year. Is wait to be seen.
And I would add that with that termination clause that Sierra read, I would be comfortable because you're committing. The amount's up to you guys, but you're committing only those first 2 quarterly payments is my understanding. And then any payments beyond that is going to have to come back to you guys for appropriation discussion. We're gonna actually probably talk about it even before then, because during the budget, I'm going to say to you guys, how much are we setting aside if the millage doesn't go through? Because again, we have to, when I'm projecting the budget, I have to assume worst case scenario, but it's not committing us. My big concern, again, ultimately the amount is up to you guys, is that we don't tie the village into paying something with no end date. Because when I read this initially, my thought was, okay, what if 2 years from now, a millage still is not passed and we're paying 87,500 or 350,000 a year? I can't tell you that in 2 years, our budget will be, it might be better. I'm not saying it'll be worse, but it could be significantly worse too. I don't know. So it's not fair for us to try to commit something. So having that termination clause does protect the village from having that just unlimited funding.
All right, so is it a better option than to have a motion made out tonight on this agreement?
Honestly, I think that there's a few items that I heard that it would make more sense to not act on this tonight and to have the library board bring those back and we could put it on the regular agenda for next Monday, the 22nd. It would, for you guys, if I was in your position, I would want to see the agreement with the termination clause. I would want to see it with the utilities removed. I personally would recommend just clarifying that the maintaining the building as we do now,
Yeah, I know.
which again, I think is really easy. And then if there's any other changes, I would share those with the board, have them make those amendments, and as soon as they're done, you can send it to me and I'll get it to you guys ahead of time. Additionally, that gives our attorney the opportunity to review it and have his comments back to you by next Monday, because I am not an attorney, so my recommendations are from the village hat, and I think it's very important that we do get David's feedback on this.
That would be, the new one coming in, or this one,
I would send him,
both?
I would send him the new one, he's already
He's
started
already
reviewing
started
the
this one.
current, so I would just send him the new one and say, hey, here's the changes. Those won't take him as long to review as the entire agreement. So he'll have a majority, the amendments, I think, will be fairly quick for him to review.
Is there something then, James, with the merger, can we go ahead and ask them to put into this new contract, if you will, a time frame of, within 6 months, we'll have this taken care of, or, you know what I'm saying?
Well, the employee lease has a 45-day notice,
I'm talking about some of the other things for discussion.
like,
Well, that would be the lease. I see what you're saying, employee lease. No, that is pretty much what it is then. Okay, well,
Yeah, when
okay,
when the district is approved and we start the transition, we just give them notice and they take
so that
over.
takes care of that.
Gives them the opportunity to secure a payroll provider,
That
gives them the
first portion.
opportunity to shop for benefits and or health.
So that takes care of that.
Yeah, I
percent
think,
there.
I
Okay.
think they've been employees this long, we've been good neighbors. This is the type of stuff we could absolutely extend 4 to 6 months for them, but knowing at some point we ultimately can call a 45-day cease to
I understand, okay.
agree. Sierra, I'll give you the last word. Anything? Any questions, comments? Okay, excellent job representing the library and the board. Thank you for your time tonight.
My last comment is to just thank you for your time on this. I know that coming together last minute on a Monday is not fun. And I appreciate that you guys are willing to work with us on this quick turnaround time and consider the, you know, the additional changes that we've brought, because we hear you. You know, we contacted our attorney late in the day today to get this additional draft because we have heard from little birdies that may have been a concern. And so we are responding to your concerns, and I hope that you see that we are actively trying to work together toward this goal. There are going to be sore spots. It's just going to happen. And so we appreciate you working with us to get through that. And also thank you for the bottle of water.
You're very welcome. Bob, bring us a plan of action. We'll get involved with the vote. Bring us a plan of action.
That is what I wanted to hear.
We will get involved. We want this as much as you do. This is a great thing for every village resident and every township and school board resident. This is a great thing. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn at 8:07 p.m.
I'll second.
I got a motion by Bill and support by Mike. Lisa, you've been so quiet and patient. Go ahead.
Jerry,
Yes.
Eric,
Yes.
Gwen. Yeah. Tim,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
Bill,
Yes.
James.
Yes, thank you. Meeting adjourned.